Okay, guys, this is my part 2 of talking to Yoav Haruvizepa. In the first part that came out some days ago, we spoke about the Holocaust, the foundation of Israel, and Yoav's personal story in the Kibbutz in Israel and how he was bullied and stuff like that. So check that episode out. That's the one before this. It says part 1 on it. In this episode, we're going to talk about his military duty, what people do after they finish in the military, which is, he for example, went to the States, tried out to be involved in some businesses in Texas, and then went back to Israel, but wanted to move away. And then, for reasons he didn't agree necessarily with everything that was going on in Israel. And then we talk about that conflict between Israel and Palestine, which is very, very complex and has a lot of different angles to it. Stuff that I didn't know about how it actually works, we talked about all that and how, and if that will ever be resolved, and how history will judge it. You know, if any country or any nation can be built without conflict. So check it out, guys. But talking about this, you say that the kibbutz were they created the soldiers. The children, the sons and daughters of the kibbutz went into the military, and you did that. I mean, it's mandatory because Israel is surrounded by people that don't necessarily like Israel, or countries, let's say. Then you have a very advanced military, one of the most advanced militaries in the world, and everybody has to go to military, right?
So, as I mentioned, the beginning of Israel was filled with many wars that shown that without having military to defend it, then Israel would probably not exist. And so it became mandatory to be drafted to the military at the age of 18. And so guys go for 3 years and girls go for 2 years, more or less, depending. And then you're also drafted for reserve military when needed. You have like a annual quota, and or if there is a war, then there's like emergency draft. So it's a very big part of the Israeli culture.
I remember because I met when I was in Peru in the mountains there, in the Andes mountains, for 9 days or something, and then I actually met people from Israel who were finishing their military service. And so I heard about this, and it was very, very interesting. But it sounded to me like, it can be very varied. I mean, when we say military, we think guns, we think killing, we think, blood and death and all that.
Yeah, so since everybody has to serve, then not everybody could be combat soldiers.
And what did you? How was your military?
The title, the general title is Jobnik, which means that I had a daily job, and I didn't sleep in the
military quarters.
Yeah, I went back to my apartment, I did office work. There are many people that even have less to do than that. They're in charge of the sprinklers, so they come in the morning to turn on the sprinklers, and then they
on the grass.
Exactly. And then they sit at the logistics guy officer office, and then a few hours later they turn off the sprinklers and they go home.
So
I'm not even sure that I'm exaggerating.
But someone has to do this.
Yeah, probably it could be given to someone else that just can go and turn on and turn them off. But
or you could automate it.
there are many other
ways,
but
But how is it like? So in your case, you were not a sprinkler guy. I mean, you were in admin duties.
I did human resources.
Yeah, but how? But what does that mean? You didn't do any physical combat training, gun training, or anything like that.
I went through training, but originally I was destined. When you reach that age, you're summoned to a meeting with a kind of an expert military girl who's 1 year older than me, who was trained to
figure out what you're made for.
My military strengths and cause. And then she found out that I was not machoistic enough to be a combat soldier, and then I was intelligent enough to
get better than the sprinklers. You are too clever for the sprinklers.
And then you're set like a score that defines. You get 2 scores. One defines your profile. So then the highest one is. Maybe I'm not allowed to say this.
No, I was just thinking about it. We might be sharing some military secrets, and Mossad will be on the door here, and a sprinkler guy comes here and goes crazy.
I think maybe anyway. You're kind of told
they give
what
you a path. Yeah,
and then I went to be. I was in the course of becoming an officer that deals with human resources, but then. I went to, it was called a supporter of combat. So even in a battalion that is fighting the war in Gaza, for example, there needs to be a human resources person. So more than one. So then you're kind of a non-combat, but you're on combat
in the
ground.
Field, yeah.
So you're trained to hold a gun, and you're trained to throw a grenade, and you're
and you have trained all this.
Yeah, but you just do it for 1 month instead of 3 months.
But you've done all this. You threw a grenade, like a live grenade. Or?
Yeah, I think so. I mean,
it blew off.
Yes, I my memory is that every soldier in the Israeli military should detach that pin and throw the grenade, and it blows off. I don't really have the specific memory of myself doing it, but. I probably did.
And is it difficult? Is it is it physically hard or mentally?
I hated it, but I'm spoiled.
Yeah.
I mean, people often go there with a very heroic cause, and they say, "I want to contribute to Israel. That's my country." Some people come from abroad, like they never lived in Israel, but they're Jewish, so they come to serve the Israeli Jewish nation.
Yeah.
And I'm like a spoiled brat. I come from a bereaved family, which means that my father's brother was killed in military. And my name is actually his name, so I have a tombstone with my name on it. One tombstone and one memorial. Like stones, and then that was a way for me to justify. I said, I come from a bereaved family, so I shouldn't go to the combat. I don't know if the
family already lost enough.
Yeah, so that kind of basically by law, if you're like the son or a brother or something. I mean, I didn't have the official terms to be So I'm not sure if that was the reason for it, but it was kind of, what I'm saying is that it was kind of a way for myself to feel okay with, saying, I don't feel patriotic. I don't feel patriotic enough. I come from I don't want to cause more sorrow to my family. So I'm not gonna do this.
But when you finish, you can. It's a professional army. I mean, it's a paid. I mean, it's
not a professional army. You're paid very small salary when you're during your mandatory period.
Yeah. But afterwards,
if you're an officer and you continue to serve professionally at that point, then you're paid. Well, let's not say. I mean, most of them for the same profession that they do. they would get more higher salary
in the private sector.
Yes, although they might get a lot of benefits,
I guess
social
pensions
benefits
and stuff like that. Yeah.
So it has
Perks.
value. Yeah.
But and you decided not to make this a career. I mean, and that was obvious for you from the beginning. I hope the sprinkler guy got out as well, because he could sprinkle somewhere privately. But how? What kind of war would have to be going on if they told you, "Listen, Yoav, we need you here," and you would have to go? Because if you don't go, they can put you to jail, right?
Yeah. There were not wars, but the only
skirmishes or
I'm not really sure. It's called like acts
or battles.
Battles, let's say, that were not announced wars, because if they're announced wars, it means that the government has to pay a lot of money to suffering citizens. So the government
so they use the definition that is suitable for them.
Because it has some length or some volume that needs to be qualified to be as a war. But there were battles that occurred while I was still part of the reserve, bench, and I was never summoned. For the majority of the time, I was abroad, outside of Israel, so they couldn't summon me even if they wanted to. So they kind of just sent me once a year, like this form that I need to fill with my current address and contact details, just in case. But I'm not a good example. I mean, there were many others like me, and my job was kind of under capacitated, I would say. When wars occur, then mostly combat soldiers are required.
But so there wouldn't. I mean, it would. What kind of war would it be? Like a total war, and then you would be there?
I really have no idea.
No,
I didn't experience it, so I'm not really. I can't really say.
And what? So like these guys that I met in Peru, like they were traveling for 6 months, 9 months, 12 months.
Yeah, a commonality for Israeli discharged soldiers that even if you only did the sprinkler thing, then you would still go through 3 years or few years where you no longer you have the transition from being under your parents, home and roof, their rules, their softness or hardness or whatever, the food that they cook for you, the rules that they have for you, and then you go and you bound yourself to a whole different organization, and then officially you belong to the country.
So it's like a rite of passage in a way.
The country takes care of your rights. You get some like extra rights being a soldier. You're very appreciated. Yeah, right. But I mean, so you get like the health services, and you get like free public transportation. Although you still have to wait half an hour because it keeps delaying all the time, and you go on buses riding into Gaza or to I don't know, like in the military in the to the camp, to the quarter, with like you stand up squashed between so many soldiers because there aren't enough buses and you need to be there in time when you come there after your short vacation, and like everyone with their big backpacks because it needs to have enough
all your stuff
for a month or whatever.
But it's still like, so you're saying it's almost like a transition. You're until you're 18, you're kind of with your family. You go into the military, guys for 3 years, girls for 2 years, and then you're a grown up, right?
So,
and then people go off, right?
My point is that it's a harsh experience. Definitely in many different levels. If you just stapled papers, or if your friends died right next to you, obviously, but still you need to lose some steam. So so it's common to go travel for like a year, 6 months. You would go either to South America, where you met your friend in Peru. I also visited Peru. I went from Argentina through Brazil and Bolivia and Peru. So there are some, this kind of fixed routes through all the touristic points, attraction points. So that's.
And you did this, and where did you end up then? Because I think you went to the U.S., right? Or
I came there from the U.S. because I had to save some money before I can spend it. So I did it in United States. Another option is it's called a favorable job. So when you finish the military, you can go work either in farming or filling gas, like in gas stations, or being, I don't know, like in the shop. So you get like extra money for it because you're contributing to the workforce as a discharged soldier. Or you can go to the US, which is more of like a trendy, tricky way to make money faster. Because dollars worth more than the shekel. And then at that point, when I made enough money, I could go to the
travel.
Yeah, and then I went back to the States.
Yeah, and then I think you told me you didn't really like it there, so you wanted to go. You went back to Israel from the US, but
well, I spent overall more than 3 years there
in the US.
Yeah, so I liked it to some point,
but something called you back.
It was my journey, and it reached the end of it. I made a lot of I did like many strange jobs there. I decorated rich people's houses in Malibu for Christmas. So I climbed up trees to wrap them with lights. I also sold these Dead Sea
salts,
cosmetics.
Yeah. That we get in the shopping malls. I want to try this on your hands. You're never gonna feel the same.
Yeah.
But exactly. But something called you back to Israel, or what? Or you gave up on the US, or the US gave up on you.
I just exhausted my options there, and I think that I felt that I wanted to spend time near my parents. I didn't want to go back because, like I said, I fled away from the kibbutz. When I finished the military, I packed my things and I kind of ran away from the kibbutz, ran away from my family situation at the time. That was very unpleasant. So at that point, I felt like I can go back to have more pleasant time with my parents, but at the same time, I wanted to carry on with my journey. So I don't go back to the kibbutz. I went to Jerusalem, and I studied culinary arts. And I worked in a restaurant, and I kind of I thought that I can spend more quality time in Israel to find out. I mean, I barely visited Jerusalem before then, and then it was my home for 2 years. So it was kind of a chance to experience Israel from a different
and also as a grown up, with the experience,
yeah.
And then you meet your girlfriend there.
I meet my girlfriend, my wife today.
Yeah, wife today. Sorry.
Yeah. Years later, actually, because I went to Jerusalem and then I went back to the States. So it was kind of an ongoing back and forth. When I really finished my business in the United States, the last thing I did, I mean, I was in charge of founding a coffee place, a kosher coffee place for the mostly the Jewish community of San Antonio, Texas. And then when that went south between me and the owner, I went to do car sailing, like a car yard with
Used
another
car
Israeli
salesman.
guy. Yeah, exactly. With another Israeli guy. So like I said, we kind of, taking care of each other when abroad. So you would always, who's the nearest Israeli? Oh, I'll talk with them. Let's see how they can help me and then I just exhausted those options and
You ran out of Israelis to get help from.
and I went back, and then I at that point I met Merav Zepa. She's the owner of the Zepa.
Haruvizepa.
Yes, surname. Zepa is a Polish surname. It was Rzepa originally, or Rzepa, which is it means radish. So we're carob radish or turnip. I'm sorry, radish. Yeah, turnip.
Yeah,
carob turnip.
But I was curious that when I met you for the first time, you had just recently moved here, just a few weeks before we met randomly, and most expats or people that I've known where I've lived, they have moved to their home country to start a family. You moved away from your home country to start a family. Why?
So let's make kind of a circle from it, because the starting point of the circle is Merav, my wife, her wish to spend time without a deadline outside of Israel, because she didn't experience that. She didn't go on the long deadline-less
journey.
Yeah. She had like short ones, but so she really wanted it, and we had it. We did it as kind of a whim, because we visited Prague, and saw how nice it was here, with having a lot of parks. We imagined our dog Menash.
Who is here with us?
Menash is right next to me at his calm.
Very calm. He's no menace.
Calmest boy. I used to call him Menash the Menace, because he used to chew on household items such as keyboards and shoes. But then he
grew out of that.
So we imagined him running through those parks. We didn't have our son back then yet, so he was our son that we imagined, and better cost of living and so on. So that's the beginning of the circle, and then let's go back.
But for you, it has never been an issue leaving Israel.
So that's exactly my point. So Merav didn't experience while I did. I went away from Israel for a long time because I had my motive even earlier to go away. I fled away from the kibbutz and from Israel. I hated my everybody. Along with my military service, I went through melancholy time for myself that was wrapped with depression at my parents' place. My family, I will describe it, let's say briefly, that it's complicated because it starts with a bereaved grandmother that kind of became less sane, I would say, after she lost her old son. And then my brother. So first, my father lost his brother, and then my brother also had his own. I mean, it's like a dynasty of ill-minded
psychological issues.
Yeah. So my grandmother, and then my dad, and then my brother also had like his issues, and there were big fights in our house. over his behavior. And in the kibbutz, one benefit that you have is that when you turn like 17 or even younger at some points, you would get your own cabin, like your own apartment that is the size of this humongous studio here. And then he went to live there and never came back. So
he was estranged from the family, or
by his choice. And then at the later point, the kibbutz got broke apart. The idea in my dad that served in growing bananas and didn't have any other, office education or high tech
qualifications.
So else. he lost his self-esteem over it. So a collection of many events along his life, the loss of his brother. His father was abusive at very earlier stages. So,
and how did this impact you? I mean, how was your? I mean, like, because obviously.
So that ends up at that very very boiling point of my dad and my mom having. I came back, like I said, from the military every day, and then I went from Tel Aviv to Haifa by train, and one of them would come to pick me up. So then in the car, each would tell me about the other, how they
hated each other.
So I was like the
in between.
I was the advisor of each from their own side. I was always. I never leaned to any side, but when I went there for dinner, for example, then it was very silent. My mom snored, so they slept in different rooms. So they had their computer, each had their own computer in their room, so they didn't even
communicate.
Yeah, so then we met over dinner, and that's how I remember it. I remember very thick air and waiting for it to end so I can go away to my
own environment,
my own apartment. So that was kind of the environment I experienced growing up on my adulthood and then military, during my psychology therapy, and that's what I fled away from at first.
Yeah, so but I guess then it made you less attached somehow to Israel. I mean,
it made me. I'm not sure what way you think it would make me less attached, but I think that going through these experiences made me kind of dull and apathetic towards sadness. I think that much more towards global sadness, because I was very much dealing with my own stuff. So while everything was going, Israel went through, terrible things like the suicide bombings. It's everything I'm saying. The kibbutz breaking apart, and my military is like the 90s, second half of the 90s, and the first half of the 2000. So I was very much not interested when in being sad when several dozen people got killed in a bus because I had my
own problems
my own problems. I didn't even consider my own problems so much troubling, because I went to deal with romantic heartbreaks. That was what kept me busy, my mind busy. So yeah, my dad has a depression. I'm dealing with it. Yeah, so my brother is not in connection. So yeah, that's That's the way it is. And I was excluded from and then I went back. So everything, I mean, that's okay. But I can't find my love. That was what I was after.
And you found it in Merav?
Oh yes, definitely, very much in a very different way than I thought. Because I think that when I first chased after it, I made it into a very romantic story of destiny and ideals or things that I'm looking for. And then now I'm probably not telling anything new to anyone, that's already experiencing it. But
you had this fairy tale idea.
No, I mean I'm referring to the later stage when you find out that it doesn't matter if she can sing or play the piano like I really wanted her to do topless for me, or be painting, and then there comes a different personality, and if someone would have described her plainly on a on a paper, then I might have lost it. But it ended up being that we have so many things in common that I didn't even imagine.
Yeah, I know her. I mean, and I can see how you complement each other very easily. I mean, it's a combination of the two of you is greater than the
commonality. I'm not sure actually. We do. I mean, I do feel that she has a lot to give me contra for. I mean, she pushes me forward. I have my job today to thank her for. Mostly because she made me open my chakra. She, with the help of her Jewish mom, they made me realize that I can no longer be this, dreamer. I want to be like a chef or a culinary, an owner of the restaurant and just serving, being waitering during that time. So I had to go and
get a real job.
I had to first complete my school obligations because I didn't complete my Bible and citizenship, civil school and math diplomas. I didn't get them, so I had to go back and make those tests. And then as soon as I did that, it kind of opened. I kind of suddenly found like a grown-up job. We went away in April of 2019. A few days after the first round of election out of 4 rounds, until they were able to establish a government. So we kind of left in a very tense time. That is the junction of many occurrences that led to it. In Israel, the murder of Rabin, the Israeli-Palestine conflict, the ongoing separation between the many different. So if the foundation of Israel was about uniting different cultures, then the beginning of the 21st century is about breaking them back apart and making them hate each other for political purposes.
But so what you're saying is that you didn't like what was going on in Israel from a political and a social point of view, right? Or society point of view.
I still am quite ashamed and have a lot of criticism towards Israel.
Why are you ashamed?
I think that it's it's a very hard question to answer because it compiled from many different reasons. I think that it's I hate the narrative of being the best nation in the world because we're Jewish. So I kind of that's something I'm taking myself apart from, and the problem is that it's serving a practical behavior. So
It fuels, and justifies.
yeah. And then, like I said, many different cultures that behave differently have to live together and agree on ideas, and the exact opposite happens and they get torn apart. It's because I think that civil rights that I consider modern and liberal are being avoided or neglected because we pretend being a liberal and Western country while we keep tie ourselves to religion. And so a lot of ideas, or let's say many options are prevented because we need to serve that idea before we need to serve the civil right idea.
So you kind of limit, or let's say the development of the society and the culture is limited by serving a religious purpose that then serves a political purpose, I guess.
Definitely. Let's discuss it first on the culture perspective, where, for example, gay rights, they're not allowed to get married. Even more than that, people that do not wish to marry religiously cannot do it in Israel.
So everyone who gets married in Israel has to do it religiously?
The ceremony can happen anyway, but I can't register myself married unless I have a certificate from a rabbinical institution. The other option is to get that certificate from a non-Israeli institution. So Merav and I got married in Poland, for example, in a town called Siedlce, which was by a very big accident. We just went there because it's an hour away from Warsaw, and when we had our stay in Warsaw, they didn't have any availability in any town hall. So we went to Siedlce, and it turned out to be where my Merav's grandfather family came from. We didn't know, and they said that the last marriage of Jewish people in their town hall was around 42 or something like that. So we were the first.
So that's one thing where the civil rights are limited by religion.
Public transportation in weekends, on Shabbat, Sabbath, you can't go. So if I don't have a car, I either have to pay a large amount for a taxi to go visit my parents, or I get a car, but there's no train or no bus. There are very specific cases where you can find different services, but by the law of the country, it's so these kind of things. So I lived in my own Tel Avivian bubble, but then I experienced it as an idea, and like I said, I was ashamed of it. I kind of felt that the atmosphere was very nervous. So even if most people in Tel Aviv wouldn't suffer from many, things such as the ones that I described, then when I ride my bike to work in the morning, and I delay 2 seconds more on the road, and I interfere, someone's driving, so they're tense. They yell at you and they push the horn, they beep the horn. Like one thing that was very outstanding when we just got here is that we barely heard
A car horn.
car horns.
But and then I guess, I mean, because it must be, because you have this ongoing issue and conflict with Palestine and you know, the Gaza and the West Bank, and I guess that also shapes a lot. And I often wonder, because, you know, I come from a country where, and I've only lived in countries where there has been peace. There has never been any war. There has never been any conflict. There's never been any danger. I never had to worry about something. And obviously, it's different in Israel and it's different in Palestine. I mean, like, there you need to be, you're aware of it, that there is a potential threat somewhere. How does it work? I mean, does everything work in a normal? I mean, you could just go and buy anything and blah blah blah. But or are people? I don't know. Are you? I mean, like, you go to the military, you drafted into the military because there is a conflict, or there is a potential conflict, or a threat of a conflict. Does everything? Is there something called a normal life in Tel Aviv, you know, or in Jerusalem? I mean.
Although I recently said that Israel never experiences normal life because you constantly go from one crisis to the other. It's like there was some silent, you know, peaceful time with the neighbors, and then there came COVID, and then the political crisis, and then again another wave of COVID, and then again. Once COVID went a little bit down, then there were the last round of bombings and so on. So that's from one perspective. But then from the other, when I lived there, I barely experienced it. I mean, again, I lived in my bubble, which is in the center of Tel Aviv. So we did have in 2015 one round of like escalation. So missiles were shot at Tel Aviv. But again, it's something that we're kind of used to. The people that really suffer from it every day, that are right next to, you know, the borders, they can't say the same like I do. And they would be angry at me for saying it because I experienced only
from distance,
from distance and only once in a while. So I kind of, you know, am again. My magic word, I'm apathetic towards it, but and they really suffer from it. But yet I'm living my bubble. But it's always there. The narrative is always there. You grow up with it. You get horrified with the pictures from the suicide bombers, and you see body parts. And you see bloodsheds. It's kind of always next to you. And it's always that debate about, you know, can they be partners? I mean, I come from my binary political position that I'm fitting into, says that I think that they can be partners. And we...
And that's what I actually wanted to ask you, because I mean, like, so what you're describing is you're describing it from an Israeli citizen point of view, that, you know, there are suicides, bombings, and there are these, you know, rocket launches onto to your cities and towns and so on, and as you say, closer to the border, there's probably more, but there is another side to it. I mean, there is the Palestinian side to it, and if as far as that narrative goes, then the let's say the settlements of Israelis has grown. I mean, the if you look at the map of how Israel was in the 50s and 60s and 70s, and then you look at the map of how it is now, it's a greater piece of land. It has been settled.
It's not well. First of all, I will not. You know, be in charge for describing the actual evolvement of Israeli settlement over the years. I can point several periods in time, mostly during the wars of 6 Days War and then the Yom Kippur War, when the majority of land was conquered and then returned as part of several agreements. and that's the roots and origins of this conflict, because originally Palestinians were chased out of their homes, even in Tel Aviv, even in Haifa. So, I mean, where does it end? And on the other side, Jewish people say it's not today's Israel that we should own, but a much bigger part of it, from the sea of the how's it called, the Middle Eastern, the Mediterranean Sea, until much eastern than that. So
yeah, but
the settlements only maintain that. They only keep the tension, because the problem is that it's mixed. There isn't an Israeli land and a Palestinian land. There is a big area where they are in between. They are interlaced. So the settlements that you described, basically, they serve kind of ideology purpose of making Israeli land bigger.
Yeah, but that must mean that Palestinian land gets smaller, because land doesn't come from the air.
Formally, there is no Palestinian land. There are Palestinian
people,
villages
and people
and people living in those villages. But that's exactly the problem, that there isn't a border around Palestinian land. It's not.
No, but at the same, I get what you mean, because it's not like a defined.
Palestine is part of Israel.
Yeah, but
so there is an area, the problematic area, the sea territories, where, or maybe not the sea, maybe the A or B, whatever, those territories, the Western Bank, where both Palestinians and Jewish live on same land, and there is no border.
No,
around
I know that, but it's like now we are here in Prague, and I could not, because you told me once how this works. I mean, like a settlement. So a group of people can go somewhere and they say, okay, here is a valley that we want to live in. And they set up a camp, or they set up a village. They build up some activity. They start farming or whatever it is that they do. And eventually it gets legitimized somehow by the military.
In earlier days, those actions were condoned by the government as a strategic measure of taking over or having control over strategic lands. Today, for the most part, there are settlements that formally Israel refers to as like settlements that are legitimized, but the new ones never start as. I mean, they always. It's a group of fanatic Zionist religious people, mostly, at the youth ages, even younger than 20 or a little above 20, and they just go as a very vigilant way of just getting caravans over there. They don't have any infrastructure. They don't get water or electricity from Israel. They are mostly get evicted by the Israeli government, and they have a lot of conflict with the Israeli military. At the same time, the Israeli military is forced to protect them because they're still Israeli citizens, and they have conflicts that they infuse. Can I say that they ignite with the Palestinian neighbors,
because they burn down stuff?
Yeah, they want them out of there. They want to get in their lives and to interfere with their farming.
And now let's just put a little break here, because Now let's just transfer this chain of events to where we are now. So we are in Prague, and there is a neighboring city called Kladno. I could never take my stuff in a caravan or whatever and just take some land, start there, and then expect the police from Prague or the military or something to defend.
I'm not sure you would know, because there is a lot of just unoccupied land. Just,
yeah, but
nature.
if I conflict with my neighbors, if I'm interfering with their
I'm
way
sure
of,
that the Israeli authorities would be much faster at evicting those groups than the Czech authorities would be at evicting you, because it's a common practice. They know about this. They follow it. These people cause harm to the Israeli attempt to keep peace. That's my criticism of them. That's why I condemn the settlers.
Yeah,
I blame them for being the root cause for maintaining the conflict between Israel and Palestine. They keep creating friction, exactly, with those, but then on the other side, which you mentioned, so obviously, like in Israel, there are a lot of common people. They just want to farm their land, that they are victims of religious ideas from two sides that say that this is a holy land that belongs to us or belongs to them, and they only want. So theoretically, and I it's my common knowledge that Islam keeps more people less secular. So I think that the ratio of secular versus traditional or religious people in Palestine, maybe generally in Islam, is smaller than for Judaism, at least in Israel. But still, I would assume that most of them just want to conduct their
daily
lives with their families. But evil forces, let's say, fanatic forces from both sides,
fuel something else.
So, and then it's important to understand that if from Israel it's vigilante, then from Palestine it's led by Hamas, even by the Palestinian Authority government. There are several groups that we consider terrorist organizations, the Islamic Brothers and Hamas and so on. But they are in charge. Hamas is in charge of Gaza, so they lead that way of life. They teach that in school. I mean, at least that's what we get. We see pictures of young children from Gaza wearing those scarves on their head and holding AK-47s with like a chain of bullets on their chest. So
yeah, but I think it takes us back to, I mean, I personally, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm not Jewish. I don't have a religious connection to anything as such, but it just like sounds like the most stupid place to start this nation somehow, because historically Jews and Muslims haven't really got along great. I mean, apart from certain countries where it has worked. And I'm thinking, because how do you see this? I mean, if you were
not sure it's correct, by the way. I think that there were many periods of time where Jewish and Islamic were together on the same side, or at least.
Maybe I'm wrong. I mean, I
think that it's it grew much more
Hostile.
significantly in this era.
If you were born in Palestine and I don't know, like 70 years ago, somebody decided to move to your country, and since then, your, I don't know, chances of living or you know, the quality of life, etc., has reduced somehow, because it's like it's almost like a marginalized group within a country, because I you know, like Palestine doesn't really have a, it's not really has a voice somehow, you know.
I'm probably I have a lot of empathy and understanding, and I am very, very shameful and sorry for the things that are caused to innocent people in Palestine, in Israel as well. But I understand that Palestine, the Palestinians are, let's say, in the weaker position, being that Israel is a founded nation with a real military and so on. So, I mean,
do you have friends from there? I mean, do you have Palestinian friends, for example?
I have only people that I had a chance to remotely, you know, speak with. You don't really encounter. I mean, well, you meet people that are considered to live in Palestinian cities. If you go there, I think maybe that's an entire segment that I should, you know, that you should cut, and then I should start my answer from this point. I do not have a Palestinian friend.
But could you? I mean, or is it just because you just haven't come into contact? Or I mean, how can you meet a Palestinian in a bar here and shake hands?
You will not often meet a Palestinian in a bar. There would be Palestinians that could come to live probably in coexisting cities, you know, Tel Aviv and Jaffa, or in Haifa. The majority is, you know, families or Israeli Arabs, families that lived there prior to the foundation of Israel, and then just stay there with their acknowledgement of the Israeli authorities. But then there are educational activities where you would brought to meet you know, groups, some kind as a like a peace promoting act of, you know, seeing that the devil isn't that bad. But it's not something that you would I mean, and then there would be cases where people would go quite a long time ago. It was much more common to get into a Palestinian city, for example, Jericho. Many Jewish people went there to the casino before the Oslo agreements. So it's possible to meet them. But I guess that since I don't have a friend, and I would be definitely welcoming the opportunity to have a Palestinian friend, then it's not enough. There isn't enough interaction to create that opportunity. Well, obviously, I can always find, you know, if I was looking after it, a chance to do it.
Yeah, but that's, you know,
it didn't come across me.
Yeah, that's, I mean, and that's how you make friends, because I mean, you don't go and it's not like looking for love, you know, you don't go and search for it. It comes. But how is it in Israel? Like, are people? It's like people like you, because I mean, as far as I know you, you're very kind of moderate in your opinions. There's no extremism in either direction from you, and yeah. How is the consensus in Israel towards this conflict, for example? I mean, because I guess
there isn't consensus. That's the entire point. The conflict of Jewish or Israel versus Palestine, or Jewish versus Muslims, is only one of many conflicts in Israel. Israel is a country torn apart. It has maybe even bigger conflicts between right-winged and left-winged, Ashkenazi and Sephardic, secular and religious. So a lot of it revolves around the conflict with the Palestinians, because the conflict with the Palestinians is the most painful, because it caused deaths on both sides, while the other conflicts that I mentioned did much less or not at all. But it's not at all less important in Israel going in the wrong direction, as far as I can see it.
But so, are there groups of people and politicians in Israel that would like to try and seek a different solution to this conflict? Or do you know what I mean? Is that voice heard, or?
I think that it would be quite cynical of them to say it, because
it would mean that they would never get in power.
It would first, yes, and then if they are already in power, then saying anything that kind of, puts the Israel superiority or whatever.
Supremacy,
supremacy, I think is so it would be considered very unpopular politically. I think that generally politics it's barely really, they're very, very afraid of handling this hot potato. This new government that formed, my hope was that they can find so many other common issues to deal with, such as the ones that I previously discussed.
Like more domestic interior issues.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Repairing and unifying everybody back again. But there's so much hatred, and that hatred was nurtured to serve political rights. I think this is also one main reason for me to be ashamed, because I think that, like I said, Bibi Netanyahu probably is not the sole guilt bearer for this situation, but the fact that half of the people in Israel think that he's their savior and king, and the other half think that he's a criminal and the Ceausescu of Israel, shows that he created such a separation. So you asked about the consensus. There is no longer a consensus. I think that 20 years ago, many more people would say, well, yeah, it's probably possible to make peace eventually. And today, this faith is gone. And yet, I believe that wars come to an end at some point. We might not live to see it, but I can't think of a war that went on forever. Anytime in the past, there were some very similar ones, between two nations of two religions or ethnicities that fought over the same piece of land, and so on. So um, I think that at this point, it's not really a dead end, but it seems to be going in downwards. We didn't hit the ground yet.
No, and I think, I mean, in if you try to look at it from I don't know, like in somehow in a detached way, because I mean, in the end, there are victims on both sides. I mean, you know, the population of Israel also threatens, and there is also casualties there, and the society suffers. The Palestinians are definitely marginalized in their own country or where they live, you know, like, and there's some sort of you know, and that's, I guess, the worldview. There's some sort of a second-class citizen in their own country. But on the other hand, we have never peacefully changed anything, like historically. I mean, everything that I enjoy as a European was fought in previous wars. You know, like there was
blood was shed over it. Blood was shed over it.
Yeah, it has never, and I often think about like if we take this conflict and you know, I don't know, 500 years from now or 200 years from now, we will read the history book that was written by the winner or you know, the conqueror, and it would be called a migration. It you know, yeah, there were conflicts, but it was a migration, and we hear these things. We talk about the Turkish ruled part of Europe, and the what are they called in the Mongolians? You know, they control. This was not a peaceful settlement. It was not like they just rode in on horses and said, "Listen, guys, we're here. Everybody happy." No, they killed, raped, and whatever. You know.
And the difference is that today it's in front of everyone's faces.
Yeah.
And sadly, it's not even real, you know, authentically represented in everyone's
what do you
faces
feel
or
is
eyes.
What do you feel is misrepresented in this? If you look at
I
it,
think that the propaganda is responsible for creating ideas for people, and although I'm filled with shame or criticism towards Israel, I still think that it's being misrepresented in the world. I think that when you say something like second-class citizens in their own country, makes one think that the government of Israel mistreats those Palestinians, citizens in Gaza or the West Bank. Now, while the Israeli government does definitely mistreats parts of the society in Israel, those parts that you see in the news that suffer the real consequences of that war are being controlled and governed by their Hamas or Palestinian Authority government, and they are the ones that are in direct responsibility for putting them in that situation. They are the ones that fight with Israel in they're not a real military, so they don't have to play by the rules, so they can
no, but they can't afford a real military.
They
you
can
know,
jeopardize. They can afford. They receive a lot of funding from
Saudi Arabia, I guess.
Part of Saudi Arabia, part of the agreement with Israel to keep some, you know, fake peace is that Israel delivers money from Saudi Arabia or Qatar, I think even more, into Gaza. The question is where they put this money.
What it's used for.
What they invest it in. If it's in hospitals that are bombed because they shot missiles out of it, or schools, or civil buildings, or if they invested in digging tunnels that can lead them to infiltrate Israeli towns right on the border where they can come in the middle of the night and attack. So, I mean,
Yeah, but that's all of this is a consequence of something. It's not like. Do you know what I mean? Like, if I had a neighbor that just started growing his garden and taking more and more of my space, and I felt like, okay, now I'm living on 2 square meters, and I can't go through his garden to get medical help that I need to get on this or whatever,
Let's say this: everything is a consequence of something. So if that's a consequence of the more recent history where Jewish people were came to have their own place, so that place was Israel because of the Zionist Congress and because of the biblical rights. So that's where they could go, and that's where Arab people already lived, and they chased them out of there because they believed it was their right, because that was a consequence of Jewish people being exiled many years ago and having, so where do you end? What's the chicken and what's the egg? So then you reach this point where you say, well, yeah, they are to blame for this and they are to blame for that, and I'm definitely at the position to look at both ways quite objectively, because even though I'm Israeli and Jewish, one thing that
You don't want the Palestinian to die, right?
I don't want the Palestinians to die, and I don't want them to be chased away back to
out of their environment,
Arab nations that are not willing to accept them. They endorse them from outside, but they're not willing to okay. But then
but that's your.
I want them to be able to have their lives where they are, and the only reason why it's not is because this land is considered holy.
Yeah, but not by you.
Not by me, no.
It's just when somebody comes and he just grows bigger and he starts taking more. And what I often think in this, and I think that,
but it's incorrect to say, if I'm understanding what you're saying, that Israel keeps trying to get bigger and bigger. That's not correct. Those settlements, they don't really. It was a very earlier activity that served that purpose of what you said, but it didn't really. It was more strategic than really, expand and grow the Israeli borders. If at all, then along the last several decades, Israel went smaller. If you really draw a map of the today's Israel, that's not. Again, my point is that consequence that you speak about, it would not make any use for anyone to figure out who is the victim and who is the
aggressor,
or conqueror, who is to blame and who did more harm, because you can count deaths and you can count civilian deaths, and you can, but eventually that would just maintain the situation.
Yeah, it doesn't solve it, and finding who threw the first stone doesn't really solve the conflict where it is now, because it has escalated, and it doesn't seem to be with any sort of conclusion in sight,
So
would you want to move back to Israel now with your son? Would you want to live there now?
I do want to live in Israel for first of all the reasons that I previously mentioned, because I enjoy eating the Israeli food in the market, and I enjoy listening to the Israeli radio, although I can hear it very well here too. But I enjoy meeting with my friends.
The roots are there,
and my family, and so on and so on. To say that I'm satisfied with the situation there, far from it.
But you would feel safe?
I always felt for the most part, safe. Apart from it's not like that, if you imagine that you go in Israel and you have to avoid, escape shootings or bombs or anywhere. It's mostly on the borders and on more sensitive areas where these actual conflicts occur.
What does a moderate Israeli that has moved away and has the luxury of looking from distance at things? You're not religious. You're not like, I never felt that you took one side. What could be a possible solution to that?
There's a spectrum of fantasy, a more realistic ideas on one end that I have on one hand, and the more fantasized ideas on the other. I think that getting rid of any holiness considerations would be the first obligatory step in resolving the situation, which is very unrealistic. So if at some point the two sides, when much more blood would be shed, would maybe think that's by the way considered a very right-winged approach. But I'm kind of I endorse
you see it
to switch. It's called transfer or land switch, which means that you take the Jewish people from West Bank and you put them back in the East, and you take the people from Gaza and you put them, so territory switch. And then what it creates, which I think is an absolute, must, is a border. So there no longer is direct interaction. You need to understand that when a Palestinian wants to go from home to their work in a neighbor city, or take their wife to a hospital, their pregnant wife to a hospital, they have to bypass like a checkpoint with an Israeli soldier, because it surrounds like an Israeli settlement, either legal or not. And then they can be detained there for many hours. And then on the other hand, remember that several times that pregnant woman ended up being a girl with like a bomb vest on her, below her, under her dress. So,
but can a Palestinian detain an Israeli when Israelis want to enter Palestine? Or if an Israeli wants to go into Gaza, can
I guess that Palestinian authorities can detain definitely an Israeli that went into Palestinian territories. It depends which authority of the Palestinian does it, because there are several that work in several different areas, and what they have to gain from it. So if it's a soldier, there were events where soldiers were, lynched. But there were other occasions where like a young Israeli couple went off-road and accidentally entered the Palestinian territory, and the Palestinian police just took them and investigated for an hour if they had any,
military or
like enemy animus purposes, and then they found out that they don't, so they peacefully returned them to Israeli authorities, and so on. But yeah, they have authority in their an autonomy.
But I remember, because in my previous life I used to do business with the Palestinian Monetary Authority, which is kind of their central bank. And when we were sending people there, they never had any problem getting there. But then when they wanted to return and get back into Israel territory, it was
They were
always
suspected
Yeah.
for bringing. Well, that's part of the fear from infiltrations with weapons. That's a very prominent measure of Palestinian of territory of terrorist groups to attack Israeli civilians in the center of town. So the borders are much more strictly guarded.
Okay, so one solution you said is to draw proper borders, to swap the land, or separate the land, and
absolute
and
separation. Yes.
And any more?
I think that this solution can also apply in terms of the Israeli nation itself, because I think that today there can be two Israels. That
to separate Israel into two states,
into Judea and one that is
less
chasing the idea of. I mean, it might not solve the entire Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but it might help a lot of people that are not really interested in it.
So you would put the more moderate ones between Palestine and Judea?
No, you would put the more moderate ones
further
behind the Israel. Let's say if Israel is the moderate one, let's say the modern ones that are allowing gay marriage and civil marriage and public transportation on Shabbat and legalize cannabis and so on. They have their own territory
further away from the Palestinians.
Further away, and then Judea are the ones that occupy the holy territories and look to expand more and more, and they conduct their conflict. So again, it doesn't really solve the conflict. It solves my kind. They allow me to
pursue the life that you want to live without.
And you know what? Even more than that, that territory should also include areas where Palestinian, moderate people can also avoid being harmed by their. Again, it's on the very
utopian.
It's a very on the very end of the fantasy spectrum. Realistically, well, I'm having a hard time imagining any resolution in the near future. There was one more idea that I enjoyed, hypothetically deliberating of, because currently I think that Israel is choosing its leaders by a demagogic reasons, feelings-based reasons, and not knowledge or logic, which leads to it still being very religion or holy purposes serving. So I would probably like to encourage people to earn their right to have
voting rights.
Not voting rights, but they have more, more impact or more.
You want less stupid people to vote.
That's
Just to boil it down to what you're trying to say.
It's not about being stupid. It's about
ignorant.
Ignorant is more right. It's not about allowing the very small minority of very smart people have more force, which might sound like what I'm saying.
Elitist.
It's the opposite. I'm saying if you're absolutely not interested in anything that goes around, you can be very religious. you can be very poor. You can have all the, the stigmas about that person that you might consider as ignorant, but still you would dedicate time to participate in that, in understanding what's going around, and not going to vote only based on what your
urges,
father, mom and dad voted, or your family, or because you think that person looks nicer or he speaks better, on television, or
but this is the beauty of democracy, that everybody has a voice and it has to be equal.
So we spoke about ideas and the kibbutz and so on and things that. So democracy is still considered to be the most
efficient.
The most efficient, but it doesn't mean that we can't allow ourselves to doubt it and to think that perhaps it can also cause, not the ideal things to happen. So, maybe
it fails. Also, it can fail. I mean, and
in this case, I think from my perspective that it fails because it allows Israel to be led by popularity or populist, and not by opinions that can really
change
something.
But I think like it's always easy to because if you look at history, and like for example in this country here in the Czech Republic, they voted their first communist government themselves, and that they voted that in a democratic election after the World War, and that government then went into the Soviet Union. I mean, it's and then people spent 70 years regretting that decision. So it's sometimes democracy fails, but now, like I wanted because we're ending this now, we're almost at 3 hours, and not that I mind, but I think maybe some people don't have 3 hours to listen to us. But they can listen in 2 or 3 parts.
Maybe that's now the end of chapter 3 or 2.
But of the listening, sometimes when I follow the media in Scandinavia. I used to live in Denmark. I'm from Iceland. I see what is in the conversation there. And they are very often said, oh, look at what Israel is doing. They're not any better than the Germans were to the Jews, or you know what I mean. And is this something that you hear in Israel? Is this a narrative that is there?
There was a military commander, quite a high rank. It was he was the deputy general with a candidacy for becoming the number one in the Israeli military, and he gave a speech about recognizing the process in Israel that reminds him of Germany of the 1930s. And by the way, my intuition was to agree with it 100%. I mean, when you're taught in school about the Holocaust, you say, how is it possible that one crazy person convinces so many people to go after him in that crazy idea of hating, just Jewish people because of their religion, and believing that they are the devil, and making propaganda to put them in that way. And now, although it's not something that maybe it's done in a more sophisticated way, but I can now understand how a grand majority of people is losing their logic, or perhaps never had it, relating to what I previously said about making decisions based on logic or so. It created a situation where a very big not majority, but a very big amount of people in Israel hate Arabs to their bones, or right-winged hate left-winged to their bones, or secular people hate religious people to their bones, vice versa, in all cases.
What happened to that military guy? after he said this?
He lost his candidacy. He went on to be part of a left-winged party, the Israeli. I appreciate him, although again I find myself get disappointed when it's kind of they cross this this line from being that person that really goes after I'm gonna be a devoted politician and I'm gonna
and then something gets to them, somebody
and
corrupts
then
them.
They get elected, and then something grabs on their balls and tells them, listen, dude, if you're not going
Joe
to
Biden calls or something and said, you gotta do it this way.
Well, there are so many factors. I think that it's about money, it's about position, it's about
maintaining power and
fear. I'm sure that many people in the main leading points of the Israeli government were at some point encountered by people that explain to them that they need to comply with some rules or else
something bad will happen.
Or else whatever, but we have your balls in our hands. So you better, put the fires down to some level.
Follow the line.
Follow the line.
Okay, Yoav, I think we're done. We're not going to solve the crisis in the Middle East. We're not going to solve the Israeli-Palestine crisis, but at least we talked about it.
I hope that I was able to give more than one perspective over this complicated, so that at least coming to find solutions for it, which would probably require much more than 3 hours. You would have more. It's not that I really know everything there is to know about it.
But these are your opinions and your ideas.
But I hope that I was able to doubt myself enough so that it gives more than one side.
I think it did. And guys, thanks for listening to this. I mean, this, as I said, I was very interested in talking to Yoav because, I mean, a lot of these topics are very sensitive, and I've always felt with him that I can have a conversation that is without any sort of prejudice or anything like that. And so I hope it has been useful to hear this from the voice of a regular Israeli citizen who, has insights and background in a lot of these things. Please, if you like what you're hearing, rate the show on Apple Podcast, and check out the YouTube channel, The Bunker, How the Hell Did We End Up Here, the Facebook page, The Bunker, How the Hell Did We End Up Here, and Instagram, Bunker Prague. The music, somebody wrote me and was asking about the music that I'm using. So when I have artists that have made music, then I usually use their music, or almost always their music on the episodes, but otherwise the kind of the theme music from the episodes from the intro is a band called 13, written in Romanic or Roman letters, Icelandic band, really great band, check them out. And the other parts of music that come throughout the episode is a band called Solstafir from Iceland, great band as well, tours around the world. And actually their singer was on my 5th or 6th or 7th episode or something like that. He's been a rock star his whole life. Yoav, thank you.
It was an honor to be here.
Pleasure to have you, and hope you enjoy your evening.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.